Ben, you in particular, Tripp. Here. All of you have to give an opening statement to me. Even though you've already stood up here and given an opening statement, all of you have to give an opening statement tomorrow. And the fabulous thing is, you are going to learn how to give an opening statement, or someone's going to tell you how to give an opening statement. It's fabulous. Heather Williams runs the Tucson, Arizona office of the Federal Defender Program, and she's the first assistant to the Arizona office. She is an amazingly fabulous woman. She has never once raised her voice. She has never once yelled at anyone. I call her the Zen of courtroom lawyers because she's so calm. So she is going to impart a great deal of information to you. And for those of you who have her tomorrow in giving open statements, you are truly honored. But for the rest of you who have only this hour, I suggest that you listen closely, particularly you, Tripp. Heather Williams.
May it please the court, Madam Prosecutor, Ms. Philpott, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Heather Williams, and I represent the defendant, my client, Denise Philpott. You know, an opening statement is like a road map. And the Constitution says blah, 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 and you don't care, and neither do I, and you're not going to do that tomorrow, because if any of you do that tomorrow, we're going to shoot you. Okay? We teach here at the college storytelling. And we, as a human race, are programmed to enjoy stories. Throughout history, our people have enjoyed stories. The art of storytelling goes across cultures, and it goes from everything from telling stories around the campfire to telling a joke. The most nervous I was ever, besides right now, was telling a joke to Terry McCarthy, the Not-So-Nimble, and Dale Cohn, because they are supreme joke tellers. From Bible stories to being read to in class or just before we went to bed, TV, movies, even reality shows all tell stories. And our jurors want to hear stories. And so what we want to teach you during these 2 weeks is how to tell your client's story. So what if instead of what I did right now, what if instead I silently acknowledge my client? I did that maybe by doing a pat on the back, by whispering something in her ear, or maybe by the time I came up here before I said anything, I looked and I nodded at her. And then what if instead I looked at every single juror? And if you have a tough time, as Josh was trying to explain to you yesterday, actually looking in the juror's eyes, my dad used to tell me, he was an actor, imagine everybody in their underwear. You won't be afraid anymore. It made me snicker too much. And so I realized I could look in between people and they would think I was looking at them, or I could look at their shoulders. So if you get nervous about looking eye to eye, practice doing that. And then breathe. Josh taught you to inhale and to exhale through your mouth. But if you think you're going to look silly up there doing that before your opening statement, in yoga they have a kind of breath called Ujjayi breathing. And what you do is you inhale and then you force with the back of your throat so it is a little bit audible, but only to you as it comes out. So I want everybody to practice this. I want you to inhale and then exhale, but audibly. You can hear something rumble past the back of your throat. And that does two things. First of all, it's going to help to calm you down. And it starts things working in your throat. So then you don't talk real high like this when you start out, or you crack and you're horsey and so on like that. Now, before you say anything, I want you to think. Don't say this, but I want you to think. The evidence will show that once upon a time. And as Bill Moffett so wisely told us yesterday, you're going to capture that dramatic moment. And you're going to do it by talking facts and not conclusions. Now, there are a couple of rules before we get started. One, you will never, ever, ever call your client the defendant. If you can avoid it, you will avoid calling your client the client. Whenever possible, you're going to call your client by their first name. Exception to that rule if your client is elderly. I had a couple of elderly clients that couldn't imagine talking to the court about them by anything other than Mr. Home or Mr. Plummer. So that may be an exception. You may be in a jurisdiction that says, well, we have to call everybody by Mr. or Ms. We fight authority. So we're going to figure out a way to get around that. And you can get around it by saying, Mr. John Smith, Mr. Smith, John Smith, and try and increase then the number of times you actually call him John. And if your story is interesting, nobody's going to care. And if the prosecutor objects, he's going to look stupid, okay? One other rule. Because we're not supposed to talk about conclusions, it's going to be very difficult and a challenge for you to label any of the witnesses in your case. And labeling is a really important thing because it helps the jury to remember who you're talking about, and it's hard for those witnesses to get rid of the label. Judy Dodd is a liar. You know, you have the person who's the convicted felon. The exception in opening statement is you can go ahead and do your story and provide enough true facts so that you can then say, and anybody who has these convictions, you'll find out, is a convicted felon. So, the convicted felon then did this and this and this. So that's the exception to going ahead and reaching a conclusion if you have the facts and can tie it in. So, what if then I were to start like this? Evan Gill was 15 years old going on 35. And for him, Denise Philpott was easy prey. He was much smarter than Denise. And Denise had been trained through a marriage to her abusive ex-husband that she could not say no. So that when Evan Gill said to her, when she said she was going to move her children and herself to Indiana from Arizona, I want to go with you. I'm going to go with you. Denise could not say no. And every mile he went across the country with her and her family was entirely voluntary. And that, you will find, is not kidnapping. Okay? So a nice little overture that you have here that has your theory of the case that you talked about yesterday, intertwines the themes that you have in your case, and sets the mood for what's going to come. Now, how do you go about creating your overture? I wish all overtures could be like this. Background music to go ahead and set the mood for you. And you have this nice little succinct paragraph that brings everybody up to speed right away. And that first statement, in a galaxy long, long ago. And you go ahead and suck everybody in. Well, that's the kind of overture we want to achieve when we are doing our opening statements. There you go. Now, everybody falls victim to it. This is the opening statement for one of the defendants in the McMartin preschool case. And they started out just the way all of us learned how to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday Mr. Blah, 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 blah. But what if instead they had gotten rid of all that stuff and just said, this is not a case about trust. This is a case about victims. And it's your job to decide who are the victims and what I call the enemy. Doesn't that set a great mood? Getting rid of all that other gobbledygook. This is another famous opening statement. very first thing. I don't know if any of you recognize this. This case is about a rush to judgment and an obsession to win at any cost. What does that tell you about this case? Anybody? What does it tell you?
OJ's
Pardon?
about to walk.
No,
That the cops didn't do it.
the
The
cops.
cops didn't do their job.
And you said whose opening statement was?
OJ's about to walk.
But OJ's about to walk. That's Johnny Cochran's first words in the O.J. Simpson opening statement. It cuts to the chase. It creates the mood. It creates the mood that followed through the entire months of trial that followed afterwards. What we want to do is we want to convey, and through certain mechanical efforts, an opening statement to create a mood and to expound on our theory and our themes. We're going to be using short statements. We're going to be talking about universal truths of the human condition, things like fear, jealousy, desperation, and anger, everything that people across the globe can understand. We're going to talk true facts and emotions. And if you say, you know what, I can't get emotional in front of a jury, I don't know those people. If people can go ahead and create emotions out of a little yellow circle with eyes and a mouth, you, with all of your education and all your talents and all your caring, can go ahead and create emotions in the courtroom. And you're not going to use legalese. You're going to leave vehicles out the door. Nobody will approach anybody anymore. They're going to get rid of all that cop jargon and not bring it in anywhere to your trial. Now, you're going to steal, no, you're going to borrow from the very best that society has to offer. And it's things that are very common, such as songs, movies, Bible stories, children's stories, books, TV shows. I mean, borrow from the best. And you all can find those elements of art in our society which remind you of your case, can become the theme to your case. If you want, you can borrow from lawyers in the best. The University of Missouri at Kansas City Law School has a site about famous trials. You can go there and borrow themes from opening statements and make comparisons to them in your own cases. Now, what about example? How short can you get? When I once did a Dodd demo, I started with this slide. It's about time, and it's about time. 7 words. How short can you get? You can get very short and still make your theme and your theory quite clear to everybody listening to you. You can use famous quotations. I like this one. When I was younger, I could remember anything, whether it happened or not. I like that in child molest cases where the kids are making things up or have been persuaded by a counselor or a parent that they have been molested by somebody else. I like it especially because it's not like Mark Twain said this last year. Mark Twain said it over 100 years ago, so what was true then is true now. I like cartoons. I had a money laundering case, and this was my theme for the money laundering case. A Ziggy cartoon. You want to pay cash? Have you got something to hide? Something that everybody can identify with. Amy from Section F, where are you? There you are. We were talking about this earlier. And I stole this from Jody English because Jody is brilliant, and that is, how many of you see a beautiful woman? How many of you see a man playing the saxophone? This is a great example of explaining how when police come into a situation, they are expecting everything to support their idea of what is going on. But the same set of facts, looked from a different perspective, a non-law enforcement perspective, can support that something absolutely innocent had occurred. And they have all kinds of stuff like this which is available on the internet that you can use as your theme and your theory of the case.
Yes, ma'am, I'm Special Agent Mannheim. This is Special Agent Black, the FBI. We'd like to talk to you about your visitor.
You here to make fun of me too?
No, ma'am, we at the FBI do not have a sense of humor we're aware of, and to come in.
And so many law enforcement don't. And so if you have a case where there really has been no crime, or there wouldn't have been any crime, if it hadn't been for law enforcement because of their lack of sense of humor, why can't this become your theme or your theory of the case? Once you've started out with your paragraph, your few short statements, you then get into the story that you want to tell the jury. You want to bring the jury along with you on a trip. And when they come along with you, they need to experience whatever events are the vital events in your particular case. You are going to be telling the client's story, but there are many, many ways to tell the client's story. You can tell it in chronological order. You can use flashback mode, that just before Bonnie, as she pulled the trigger to that gun, flashed back to everything that had happened in her life that brought her to that point, to every episode that Bonnie had with Albie before she actually pulled that trigger. You can chop your opening statement up into chapters. You can envision it as different scenes in a movie, or you can go ahead and storyboard it. What storyboarding does is it takes different images or different events and it places them in different orders, and they can be rearranged, and you can decide where you need to focus in and so on like that. You can find out all kinds of information about it online. You can go ahead and do an opening statement entirely by introducing the characters in your particular case to the jury. You can do a freeze frame, a slow motion. You can take a crucial event in your case and you can zoom in on it and create through senses, through what kind of lighting there was, through how it smelled, through whether or not your client's hands were sweaty, whether or not their heart was racing. Zoom in on that crucial event so that the jury understands exactly what was going on at that time. You can do it by point of view. You can do it from the omniscient person, the person who sees all and knows all what's going on in somebody's head. You can do it purely from your client's point of view. You can do it from a witness's point of view. You could do it from an object's point of view. The getaway car in the Dodd case, or the packet of bank money in the Dodd case. A gun. You could do it the hotel bedspread in the Brown case. You could be an object telling their story through facts in the case. And you can do it in present tense, as Josh was having people do yesterday, describe things in present tense to bring them there, right there in the moment, or you can do it in past tense. You have so many options on how to tell your client's story. This is a part of an opening statement that I had where I was telling things chronologically in a story. I had a calendar describing my client and his roommate who he had working for him at a store, and what happened on particular dates. And then I came to when the FBI wanted to search his house and seize his computers to look for child pornography, and when they took him out of the house and into the car outside and they interrogated him. And then I freeze frame on that. I pulled that crucial event out because that's when the FBI said that he confessed, to describe that cold, rainy February morning. How they woke my client up, and they had to give him, because it was cold outside, something to keep him warm, but all they could find was a Looney Tunes vest that was hanging in his closet that his mother had bought for him at Disneyland. And how he had just woken up, he hadn't even had a chance to go pee yet. And how they took him down to the car, and they handcuffed him, they kept him in the car, and it was cold in the car, and there was an FBI agent. You know, you're painting a story, you're talking about the crucial event, even within the chronological description of what has happened in your particular case. And then you can pull out of it and go ahead and talk about other events. You can talk by character. This was a conspiracy that my client was alleged to have committed for money laundering purposes, and we had lots of people with foreign names. We had undercover agents, and I wanted to go ahead and talk first of all about my client, James Beard, and what kind of background that he had. And then once upon a time, he met Franklin Aguiar, and Franklin Aguiar's background, and who he introduced him to after that, and how he met the informant. And so I was describing the different characters involved in this particular alleged conspiracy. so that the jury, first of all, wouldn't get confused, but secondly, would have an idea what this case was about, without having to take things necessarily chronologically. You can then also focus on the aha moments. As Jeff, I heard him talking to his group today, those key moments in your particular case. The ones that make a jury say, oh, I know why that happened. And this is, I think, a fun example for describing that from the movie I Hate.
You look pretty nervous. Yes, sir. You're sweating like a pig. Yes, sir. Your eyes are all bloodshot. Yes, sir. You've got pop, don't you? I'm confiscating this. This too.
How many of you, when he went to the kid in the dark shirt who was sweating, thought, oh shit, the kid's in trouble? Was there a point after that where you realized it wouldn't be anymore? Anybody? When the teacher picked up the Cheetos, why did he pick up the Cheetos? Yeah, that kid wasn't in trouble anymore. That's the aha moment, okay? All cases have an aha moment. It's disappeared evidence. It's when Bonnie maybe went to get the gun. It's when James got closer to Paula. I mean, in every case, there's an aha moment that helps you and will help the jury to understand what happened and why your client's not guilty. Now, it's one thing to go ahead and know what you're going to say. It's another to say it. And Josh taught us two very good techniques yesterday on how to go ahead and say it. One is the tone of voice. Many of you have a problem with being too soft-spoken. Get over it, okay? When Albie shouts to Bonnie, I want another beer, you shout, I want another beer! And you can do that in front of a jury. And you can make theirs get goosebumps because then they're there. And they know the kind of anger and they know the kind of asshole that Albie was. If you're James and you're in the hotel room and you're asking Paula, why did you say those things about me? You use the tone of your voice and you use the pacing of your voice to go ahead and bring the jury there so they get to know James much better. Movement. Do not confine yourself, unless you're in federal court, to the lectern. And we'll talk about how to get around that a little bit. When I came in here, the group that was in here, Section L, will tell you it didn't look like this. I came in and I made this space my own. I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. And I felt free to go ahead and rearrange everything here to go ahead and make the space my own. What I suggest to you is that when court is not in session, make arrangements with the clerk to go into whatever courtroom you're going to have your trial and walk around. Sit in the jury box. Get an idea of what the jurors are seeing. Can they see you at counsel table? Can they see your client? If they can't, do you want them to? Move your table if they'll let you. You know, figure out what's behind the clerk's bench. You know, they have staplers there. They have two-hole punches. Sometimes they have candy. Go there and explore the courtroom. Sit in the witness stand. See what the witness sees. Get familiar with the surroundings. And if there's something that you want to do in your particular case, a demonstration, a physical demonstration, feel free to go ahead and rearrange the furniture so that you can go ahead and convey exactly what it is that happened in your particular case. Now, you're in federal court, and you step to the podium, or as Judge Manuel Real in Los Angeles says, the lectern, there are ways to get around that. Because, what do they say? If it's interesting, you can get away with all kinds of stuff. And it doesn't matter if the prosecutor objects. But you know what? I'm by the lectern. Here I am by the lectern. Nothing to worry, I'm by the lectern. So, but again, if it's interesting, nobody will hopefully object. And if they do, the juror's gonna think they're silly anyways. You come back, you're interesting, they don't care. Yeah, so making your space your own is an important part of this, and you may hear your faculty members talk about that. It's okay to use exhibits for demonstrative purposes during your opening statement if it's going to help make things much clearer. If you have a mis-ID defense and the alleged victim gave one description of the perpetrator, and when they arrested your client Johnny 15 minutes later and the description didn't match, spell it out for them. That's going to stick with them throughout the entire trial. There are other kinds of demonstrative evidence you can do. You can do calendars and you can do maps as well. If there are pictures and photographs and diagrams that you know are going to come in, you're going to stipulate to coming in, go ahead and bring those in also. Okay? Perspective. Perspective is like point of view, and that is you can go ahead and switch back and forth as long as you make it clear to the jury where you are in your opening statement. You can switch from the omniscient person to the first person. You can switch from present tense to past tense and back and forth like that to make it interesting. We're going to talk now about techniques of language, looping, trilogies, chiasmus, and parallel structure, which are all language tools to help make your opening statement more interesting. And this is applicable not just to opening statement, you're going to hear about it in direct, you're going to hear about it in cross-examination, and you can talk about it in closing. Looping. Looping is where you take something that has been said, a phrase, a word, and you loop it into the next statement, and the statement after that, and the statement after that. A trilogy is because threes are magical. Threes are magical, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Manny, Mo, and Jack. You know, trilogies are magical. And if you're going to loop, don't loop any more than 3 times because after a while it seems sort of ridiculous. And you will have made your point by then. For instance, the robber pointed the gun at Joe. With the gun pointed at him, Joe was told to empty the drawer. With the gun pointed at him, Joe handed over the money, and with the gun pointed at Joe, the robber left. Obviously, the loop is with the gun pointed at him. But why do we want to loop that? Anybody? Okay, so that he couldn't ID who the robber was. He didn't get a good look at him. So looping is a great technique to go ahead and create the urgency of what may be happening in a particular moment so that if somebody's claiming they saw something later or did something later, it becomes clear they could not and did not. A chiasmus, or as McCarthy likes to say, chiastic alliteration? Okay. Chiastic alliteration. Thank you, Terry. I'd rather be looked over than looked at, said Mae West. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's where you take the words in a phrase or a sentence, and one direction they mean one meaning, you flip them around, and they take on an entirely different meaning. It's a great language tool to go ahead and lock into the jury's brain what your theme, your theory, your client's story may be. Parallel structure. The opening of A Tale of Two Cities says it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom, it was an age of foolishness. It was the epic of belief, it was the epic of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, and on and on and on. But it's very compelling. And it's like manic depression, it's this roller coaster of highs and lows, and it makes people want to see. And it makes them experience the highs and the lows of what your client went through by doing this parallel kind of structure. What other techniques can you do? You need to paint a picture, you need to create a mood. And how do you do that? There is a poet, Sidney Lanier, who was born here in Macon, didn't live his whole life here, went on to teach at Johns Hopkins, lived in the middle part of the 1800s. There's a historical museum for him over on High Street, but he wrote this poem, "There's more in the man than there is in the land." And it says, "I knowed a man which he lived in Jones, which Jones is a county of red hills and stones. And he lived pretty much by getting the loans, and his mules lived nothing but skin and bones, and his hogs was flat as his cornbread cones, and he had about 1,000 acres of land." What's that telling you? Anybody? What about the man? Was he rich or poor?
Or
He was poor. It's one thing to say, you know, my client was poor, my client lived in poverty. It's another to say, my client lived in a one-room shack, and it was built out of whatever he could find at the dump, which was just up the road from him. And he carved out a space off the side of the road, and part of his home, this one-room shack, was made of pallets. Some of it was cardboard. Some of it was plasterboard that he had found at the dump, and some of it was just plastic sheeting. And inside of that one-room house, he lived with his dear wife and his 3 young sons, all in this one-room shack that wasn't even as big as this jury box. Just to have described how poor my client is without saying that he's poor at all. And hopefully I've brought you to the home where he lives. You can do that by doing the description of what's happened rather than by just labeling it, he's poor. So think about doing that. Find the places in your cases. Maybe it's the busy bar on the Riverwalk in the Dodd case, or the hotel room in the Brown case. Maybe it's the bathroom where Bonnie curled up after she shot Albie. There are places that can be described without just one word. If you describe that to the jury, you bring the jury there with you. This next one is to help create a mood. No Son of Mine off of the Genesis album We Can Dance. And for me, that became my theme song when I had a battered woman case. It's a song that describes the children in an abusive household listening to the battering of their mother by their father. I soon was living with the fear every day of what might happen at night. It's such an incredibly powerful description and creates such an incredible mood of what it is like to be an abused child or an abused spouse. When they don't know when the next beatings come, but they know that it is coming, and they're constantly living in fear of it. So use descriptions like this, rather than just saying Bonnie was a battered woman, rather than saying that Mario was a betrayed man. Paint the picture and create the mood so that the jury knows and can identify with their client and how they felt. And then how do you end? How do you get to the not guilty, not guilty, not guilty? Again, short statements. Stick with your theme. Stick with your theory and create the mood. You can do it in a summary kind of way. I had a case where my client was charged with 3 counts of killing 1 Border Patrol agent. Federal law is amazing, isn't it? And so it was because the government had all these different theories about why it is that my client killed the Border Patrol agent. Well, he didn't, but I had to summarize everything that I had described previously. And so I went through the summary of every single fact we had presented about why my client did not kill the Border Patrol agent. He was acquitted of all those counts. You can go ahead and also use another kind of summary to go ahead and draw a factual conclusion. And that is, you've already talked about the snitch in this particular case and the kinds of charges that they would have been facing and what's going to happen as a result of the plea agreement in their case and how much time they're saving. And that is, you can summarize conclusively by saying, 30 years was escaped by saying my client did it. So go ahead and reach that conclusory summary from something that you've described in much more detail earlier to explain why it is that your client's not guilty and whatever Abe has to say is not valid. You can also do the laundry list. If you're talking about a self-defense case and there have been many events that have happened between your client and the person they shot at, and you've described every single one of these events in your opening statement and talked about the facts of every single one of these events, once you do the laundry list, you realize there really are a lot of events. There really are a lot of reasons about why that particular client, why James it was, would go ahead and shoot Ben. Had all these reasons, and the laundry list helps you to go ahead and impress upon the jury how many reasons there were. It's the summary after you've described all those events earlier. Your last word should be what you want the jury to do and why they get to do it. Eben Gill begged Denise to let him come with her and her children to Indiana. Eben Gill pleaded, Emmett Gill insisted, and then eventually Eben Gill forced his way on that trip with Denise and her children. And for every single mile that they went between Arizona and Indiana, Eben Gill was there because he wanted to. And you know that that is not kidnapping.